Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Thank you. So, what was I talking yesterday? Do you remember something? Yes.
Sir, you talked about two of the writers who influenced T.S. Eliot, Miss Jessie and Fraser.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes. So, I was talking about the mythical method, right? The anthropological writings, especially Miss D.C. Weston's From Ritual to Romance, which talks about the legend of the Holy Grail, and it also talks about the kind of biblical wasteland that was there once upon a time in the regime of Fisher King. Yes? Then I was talking about seminal writing of James George Fraser and his The Golden Bough, which was published in, as I said, 12 volumes over the period of around uh, 40 years or so, right? And I was talking about how this piece of writing, while taking the cyclical method, the aspect of being recurrent, it talks about the various stories across the world, be it primitive folk, one thing is common, that all these narratives, all these rituals, all these practices, they all talk about the cyclical process. They all talk about birth, death, and rebirth, right? I also talked about how Fraser talks about the uh, recycling aspect, or the cyclical process, not only in terms of God, especially if you consider Christ as a God, his birth and his death and his rebirth, and of other gods, but he also talks about the same in terms of seasons, right? Where seasons are recurrent in nature and they recur, they are in cyclical process. Fraser also talks about the cyclical process involved in the process of sowing the seed and then nurturing, it's maturing, and it's then reaping, and then it continues. Then it also involves the same process of a cyclical thing in that way. So these things are important when you talk about James George Fraser and his Golden Bough, and we shall be seeing the impact of this, the references of this very pattern in the poem, that is the West Land. Uh, the poem that is the West Land, the poem that is the West Land, if you talk about its structure, if you talk about what its structure, then it will seem to you as a kind of symphony, kind of what? Symphony of interconnected movements. And you must, when you'll be reading the poetry by yourself, you shall come to know that this poetry is divided into five parts, and each part in that way uh, is a kind of symphony, kind of what? Symphony of interconnected movements, each, and then five parts, then five interconnected movements, which deals with which talks about or which renders various aspects of modern life and connecting, and somebody has just joined. So, and as I said, five parts, interconnected movements, and they all work as a kind of symphony, as a kind of a musical movement, musical flow, musical connection, and they all deal with various aspects of this modern life, which we could discuss yesterday in terms of what vast panorama of futility and anarchy. Vast panorama of what futility and anarchy, and uh, this structure, as I said, symphony. It's based on. It's a kind of symphony. It's symphony in terms of music, and it conforms and it follows the critical belief of T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, as it involves a system of recurrence. System of what? Recurrence. And in this connection, Eliot himself, Eliot himself writes, and I would like you to note it down, or to keep in mind, whatever you like, the way you like. So Eliot himself has written something important, and he says that the use of recurrent theme. I'm quoting Eliot. I'm quoting Eliot. The use of recurrent theme is as natural to poetry. The use of what? Recurrent theme is as natural to poetry as to music. As to music, there are possibilities for verse which bear some analogy, which bear some analogy to the development of a theme by different groups of instruments, by different groups of instruments. There are possibilities of transition. There are possibilities of transition in a poem, in a poem comparable comparable to the different comparable to the different movements of a symphony or quartet, or quartet. There are possibilities of there are possibilities of contrapuntal arrangement. There are possibilities of contrapuntal arrangement of subject matter. Subject matter. And this he writes in his essay, The Music of Poetry. The Music of Poetry. Right? So he talks about a kind of symphony, a kind of musical arrangement, and it is like different instruments are coming together, are coming together, right? So you think about a modern musical play, not play, it's a modern musical performance in that way. And if you listen to the music, and you would be coming across different sorts of instruments, different kinds of instruments coming together, right? Uh, did you get the idea of Eliot? What does he mean by the use of music and its symphony, and the music and its symphony, especially in the poem The West Land? Yes, tell me. Yes. Did you get the idea?
Yes, sir.
Symphony. Symphony. Okay, am I audible properly?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
Okay. So as I was talking, as I was talking, the poem involves five movements, and these five movements, as was just talking in terms of their interconnectedness. So let us just talk about what are these five movements. What are these five movements which Eliot has named in his masterpiece, that is The West Land? The first is the burial of the dead. The first movement is titled The Burial of the Dead, right? The burial of the dead. And this burial of the dead, you have to remember Fraser's The Golden Bough, because the burial of the dead in Fraser, and even in the prototype of typical Christian example, implies the idea of rebirth. Implies the idea of what? Rebirth, right? Be it the burial of the god, dying god, fertility god. Fertility god means what? This harvest season, right? There are several mythical stories which I would like to talk about in due course of dealing with the poem. But just remember, those who belong to agrarian society in this class, they must have the fair idea how the burial of the dead means what? The burial of the crop, seeds beneath the ground, naturally entails the idea of its coming out. It entails the idea of what? Its rebirth. Its rebirth. So it is quite interesting to see whatever has been the prevalent idea, even in Christianity, even in different antique primitive folk beliefs and folk rituals, and what kind of perspective Eliot has in this modern wasteland. That is quite interesting to see when we will be doing the burial of the dead. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. The second moment is a game of chess, a game of chess. And this a game of chess, do you remember the last text which you read where there was a game of chess? Yes. Do you remember the last text which you read having the reference towards game of chess? Yes,
The Tempest, sir.
the Tempest. In what context? Positive or negative?
Sir, it was in positive context.
It
Uh,
was
in positive context.
in positive context, right? A game of chess, very pertinently observed. A game of chess in the Westland is not that positive as we have seen in the Tempest of Shakespeare. We shall talk about how, and this chapter, this movement will let us know what does a game of chess mean here in this West land. And both the movements, both the chapters, if I can say them, both means what? The burial of the dead and a game of chess. They both talk about earth. I mean, if you talk about Western context, there are four elements, right, which constitute the world. Indian perspective talks about five constituents, five elements. Would you please let me know what are four that is Western and what are five that is Indian? Anybody? And please switch on the camera, yaar. Anybody? Yes? Shruti, Prachi, Ananya. Yes? So many others are there. Huh?
So Indian
I,
elements comprises of air, water, earth, sky, and
Fire.
say it again.
air, water,
What? Air. Air, na?
what? Yes, sir.
Air,
Water, earth,
water,
earth and sky,
earth, sky,
and the fifth element. No.
fire. Fire. Five elements. And what are the Western elements? In Indian perspective, we call it in Sanskrit, if you remember the famous shlok, Kshitijal Pavak Gagan Samira, right? Yes, na? Kshiti Jal Pavak Gagan Samira, right? Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And what are the and what is that Western? What are these Western elements?
So only water, air, fire, and earth.
Right. Yes. Yes. So I'm saying that if you talk about this poem in terms of in terms of these four elements which constitute our life in that way, then I would say that the first two movements, the first two chapters of the poem, they are about earth, earth, earthly life, mundane life, earthly realities, corporeal realities, carnal realities, right? which we shall be seeing line by line by tomorrow. Okay? So the first one is what? The burial of the dead. The second one, a game of chess. And the third one is, yes, the fire sermon. The fire sermon. Fire as an element, as one of the constituents. And this fire here stands for the fire of desire, fire of the first stanza of Selling to Byzantium, that is no country for old men, fire of Mahatma Buddha, the way he talks about fire in terms of desire, kamana. What is that? Kamana. And this chapter will also refer to one of famous Christian saints, Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine, who in his Confessions talks about fire. What does he talk about? What is the Western perspective? What is the Eastern perspective of Lord Buddha, our own Buddhaji? And how does Eliot use these Eastern and Western perspectives together in the third movement, the fire sermon, that shall be seen in greater details. The fourth movement, the name itself refers to the element, one of the elements, death by water. Death by water. So, and you must be very happy to know that death by water is the shortest movement. Shortest. Because it contains only, I think only 8 to 10 lines, not more than that. So it's a good news. Because burial of the dead is pretty long. So is the case of game of chess. So the fire sermon. And so the last, that is the fifth movement, what the thunder said. What the thunder said. Thunder. And it's saying where? In the sky. In the sky, air. That is the fourth element, right? And what the thunder said again yokes two perspectives. The first is Western, but the greater importance is given to the Eastern perspective, the Indian perspective, which talks about one of very famous reference to one of the Indian Upanishads, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, right? And there is something which shall be discussed in details, and we shall be coming to the fifth movement. So the five movements: the burial of the dead, a game of chess, the fire sermon, death by water, and the last is what the thunder said, right? And they all are interconnected, like a musical piece, as Eliot has claimed. Whether this musical piece will give you peace or not, I can't confirm this. I can't say anything much about that. If you are fond of listening to some, have you recently seen a very famous web series? What does that mean of that? Bandish Bandits. नाम सुना है? Bandish Bandit. This bandit, na? Yes, Bandish Bandits. Heard about it? No. You don't watch web series, right? Good, very good. Keep it up. Anyway, so let us see. We shall be seeing how does it happen. Anyway, so these are the 5 movements. As I was, and as we all know that Eliot defines poetry as an escape from emotion and escape from personality, both the things, right? And he also talks about his important concept of objective correlative, isn't it? So, what is the objective correlative? Or what are the objective correlatives of this poem? If I talk about it in terms of plurality, then each chapter, each movement contains number of correlatives. But if I talk about it in terms of singularity, in terms of a singular term, then we must talk about that. We must talk about that. And in that way, that objective correlative, that is singular, happens to be a narrator. Happens to be what? A narrator who is Tiresias, 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 Tiresias or Tiresias, right? And I'm quite sure that all of you know who is that. Who is this Tiresias, right? Isn't it? Those who have little memory, for them, I would like to tell that Tiresias happens to be the part of ancient Greek mythology, and the story is very interesting, and this story will let us know why Eliot chose Tiresias to be the protagonist or to be the narrator of this West land, right? So, as I was saying, that in Greek mythology, Tiresias is that character who appears in the writings of Sophocles. He also appears in the writings of Aides. Am I audible? Please tell me.
Yes, sir.
He also appears in Pindar and Ovid's Metamorphosis. Ovid's Metamorphosis. Ovid's Metamorphosis gives us a very detailed account of rise and fall of this character, that is Tiresias. And Tiresias once, it's a story, it's a mythical story, was passing by on the road. And on the road, he saw 2 snakes. Not homosexual, but heterosexual snakes. One female, another female, mating. In India, it is said that one must not look at mating snakes. Do you know this? I mean, first of all, let me talk about, do you like snakes? And what will you do when you find a snake or you look at a snake on the road, single, all alone, black one, with the hooded or not hooded, I don't know. You must have that guts, to see at the snake. Anyway, so in India, it is the belief that when two snakes make love, I mean, at least think about that cinema. Which cinema? Nagin or what? Nagin, na? मैं नागिन तू सपेरा. Which song was that? इसमें नागिन बदला लेती है नाग का. आप लोग सिनेमा नहीं देखते हैं. Anyway, so this is a kind of sin. It's a kind of profane activity, and one must not even indulge in the voyeuristic pleasure of looking at mating snakes. So is the belief there. Where? In Greek. So this is a kind of an archetypal belief, right? Prachi, did you get the idea? This is the archetypal,
Yes,
right? Now, this man, Tiresias, he doesn't merely see the mating snakes, he also dares to pelt a stone at them. He also dares to throw a stone at them, right? And out of this, he at once was transformed into a woman as a kind of punishment, this is the myth, right? So don't ask how could he change his gender, right? This is a myth, okay? And the things which can happen in a myth cannot happen possibly in our practical day-to-day life. So a man sees the mating snakes, he throws a stone at them as a sin, as a punishment. He becomes a woman. And he lives into that state of being a woman for a longer time. So first of all, he is a man. He has lived like a man and has accumulated lots of manly experiences. And he is the one who also has the credit, the virtue to be a woman, literal woman in that way. This is not the Jungian anima and animus. No, it's not like that. He literally could become a man and he literally could become a woman later on. So he had the privilege to be a man and a woman both in his own lifetime. So he becomes a very fit example of having the experiences of a man and the experiences of a woman in that way. So he's a classical bisexual. When I was on Facebook a long time ago, maybe in 2012 or 13, when I deleted myself from that social media, I was stalking somebody, not stalking in that way, but I was simply looking at the profile of somebody, and it said that somebody had written the sexual preference, and the preference was bi-curious, and somebody wrote that he is bisexual. So I just got reminded of Tiresias. Okay, see, Tiresias is no more. He is within us. So we have several bisexuals around us. That's a different thing. But this is Tiresias. And after some years, he again walks on the road and again finds the same couple, same pair of snakes together. He again throws a stone, and he again comes back to his manly form. Manly form. This is one story. This is what? One story, right? The second story is related to GS. Who is GS? Who is GS?
Greek god of sky.
The god of the sky, supreme god maybe, right? And his wife Hera. And his wife Hera. So once what happens? GS and Hera got into a trouble, and they began to fight, they began to quarrel over one question. Over one question. And the question was between the mating of a man and a woman, who enjoys more? Who enjoys more? GS was saying Hera, or Hera was saying GS, or GS was saying a man and Hera was saying a woman, right? Irrespective of all these things, nobody could answer and nobody could reach to a conclusion. Who will make GS infuriate by saying that you enjoy more, and who will make Hera infuriate by saying that you enjoy less? Anyway, so who was summoned? Tiresias was summoned. Why? Because of his manly experiences and what? Womanly experiences, both, right? So he was summoned and he was asked to adjudge this very dilemma, right? He says a man enjoys more. Some versions say woman enjoys more, but I will go to the man because of, I don't know why. But he says that man enjoys more, and as a result, Hera becomes angry, she becomes infuriated, and she curses Tiresias. She curses Tiresias to be a blind man. To be a blind man, right? And if you remember Oedipus the King, Oedipus the Rex, the play, you would be remembering that Tiresias was blind there, right? But Hera, as Hera made him blind, but GS was the winner, so he too had to do something, na? So he says, okay, you become blind, no issue, but I will give you certain supernatural powers, and according to which you shall have the power to foresee into future, to predict what is going to happen in future, right? That's the kind of power GS allotted to Tiresias as a kind of compensation, as his wife Hera cursed him to be blind, right? So this Tiresias, as I said, is a complex mixture of a man, of a woman, right? He is blind, as well as he is what? He has the power to see into future. And the basic thing is, he has been roaming and he has been a witness to the various civilizations, and he has the privilege to see different kinds of wastelands. different kinds of wastelands in that way. And if I talk about prominently, at least he has seen the Greek wasteland as it is there in the play Oedipus the King, right? And then, if you know that Sophocles wrote 3 plays, Oedipus the Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and the last one is Antigone. Antigone, right? Antigone or Antigone, Antigone maybe, right? So, in all these plays, plus in the plays of Euripides, in the writings of Pindar, the old writer, right? Pindaric odes, right? And even in the writings of whom I was just talking about Ovid and his Metamorphosis. So he is the one who has been seeing the world from a larger and longer time. He's a man, he's a woman, he's a bisexual, he has been old, he has been a young man, he has been a teenage, he has been a boy. And he has seen fertility, he has seen futility, he has seen panorama of futility and anarchy, he has seen everything. He has seen what? Everything. So what could be the best narrator, the best protagonist for Eliot than Tiresias? That's why Eliot chose Tiresias to be the protagonist, to be the narrator of this masterpiece, The Waste Land. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, I think you shall keep this in your mind, right? At least Tiresias or his story and why is he important, why is he significant, right? There are certain other things which I haven't told because I leave certain parts to your exploration as well. Right? You Google it, you find it on your own, because I can't talk about everything and each thing in that way. Okay, now let us talk about the dedication and the epigraph. Dedication and the epigraph of the poem, The Wasteland. So, this poem is dedicated to Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound. And we already have seen the kind of status Eliot has given to Ezra Pound, where he says that Pound didn't create poets, he created a situation. Do you remember that? He created a situation. And this poem is dedicated to Ezra Pound, which is written like Il Miglior Fabra, which means the better craftsman, which is taken from 12th century Italian poet Dante. 12th century Italian poet Dante and his masterpiece Divine Comedy, in which he talks about Araunt Daniel. Araunt Daniel. Araunt. Please note it down. Araunt Daniel. Araunt Daniel, right? And he dedicates that to this man, Araunt Daniel. Okay? So, in the masterpiece that is Divine Comedy, Dante dedicates that to whom? Araunt Daniel. And here we have Eliot copying and dedicating that to his mentor and friend Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound. Just 1 minute. Yes. And why does Eliot call Ezra Pound a better craftsman? He calls him a better craftsman because it was the assigned task of Ezra Pound to read the manuscript of the Westland and do the needful in terms of trimming, in terms of omitting, in terms of deleting, and in terms of adding. And the poem, The Wasteland, which was initially titled as, very interesting title, let me tell you this first. Very interesting title. The initial title of the poem was not The Wasteland. It was, very interesting one, I don't know what happened, what must have happened to, what was happening to Eliot's mind behind this title. The title was, He Do the Police in Different Voices. What kind of name is it? I don't know. He, He, D-O-Do, T-H-E, the police, P-O-L-I-C-E, police in different voices, in different voices. This was the first title which Eliot gave to his The Wasteland, which was later on changed as The Wasteland. So this jumbled piece of writing was handed over to Ezra Pound with responsibility to trim it, to prune it, to cut it, and to do whatever he wants to do. And Pound did that. Pound did that. And initially, the poem was supposedly, I'm not exactly sure of the number of the number of the lines in the poem, but it was beyond 1,000 maybe. And Ezra Pound shortened that. He cut several lines of the poem and could make it of only 433 lines. 433 lines, right? So this was the job of the poet Ezra Pound. That's why he has been dedicated this the poem, The Wasteland, as Il Miglior Fabra, Italian Dante, as the better craftsman, the better craftsman. man, which Eliot himself perhaps was not. Okay, am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now, let us talk about epigraph of the poem. Epigraph is important because it will let you know the kind of poem you are going to study from tomorrow, hopefully. Epigraph is taken from is taken from first century AD, first century AD Roman satirist, Roman satirist, first century AD Roman satirist Petronius, 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 and his famous book Satyricon, 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 first century AD. Okay. This epigraph talks about a character whose name is Trimalchio, and he is talking to his drunken friends. Drunken friends, they are drunk. He is speaking to his drunken friends and asking them a particular woman of Sibyl of Cumae. Sibyl of Cumae. Spelling you may note down if you want. Sibyl, Sibyl, Cumae, Cumae, Cumae. Who is in a cage, dying. The Sibyl of Cumae, right? A cage, dying, desperate, frustrated. Desperate and what? Frustrated. And when asked, what does she want? What does she want? She says, I want to die. I want to die. Why? Why does she want to die? The answer is Sibyl. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sibyl was granted a boon. She was granted a boon by the god Apollo. Apollo is the god who grants her the boon for a longer life. For a longer life. We also can say that the woman asked her the boon to live a longer life, but in turn she forgot to ask for immortality. She is given the boon not to be immortal, but to have longer life than usual. On the condition that she shall be given a handful of sand. A handful of sand, as long as even a single particle of a sand is there in her hand, she will remain alive. But you see, the very desire to live a longer life than usual is very detrimental desire after all. And she became lean and thin, emaciated like a reptile walking on the ground. And then she must have realized her fault, and then when asked, what does she want? She answers back that she wants to die. So the very dichotomy between the question of mortality and immortality is there in Petronius's book Satiricon and the woman, in fact, of Sibyl of Cumae. The same can be found in, if you remember, Alfred Lord Tennyson's Tithonus. Do you remember that? Tithonus? Yes? Tell me. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are. So I haven't read it.
Anybody? Those who are from BHU, they must have read the poem Tithonus in BA Part 2. Yes? No? Shruti, Prachi, tell me, where are you? Ananya Mishra 2.
Yes, sir. We have read the
Yes,
Tithonus.
sir.
So tell me, what is there in Tithonus?
Sir,
Could you
it is the
anything?
kind of curse which Tithonus gets in the name of reward uh, from the goddess of dawn.
Hmm.
He asks for the gift of longevity, but in return
Mm-hmm.
he is cursed with the uh, long life with old age, and he
Mm-hmm.
asks the goddess to release him with the painful life.
Right, right. Yes. So Tithonus is a mortal human being, and the goddess of dawn, Eos, she falls in love with him. Tithonus asks for the boon of immortality, but instead she grants her the boon of longevity. And as Prachi was saying, that he becomes old, crippled, almost like a dead man. He summons the goddess and asks her to take the boon back. But be it Indian god or Greek god, they all are very smart. And they all are with the condition that whatever they give, they can't take back. So she has to take back the boon granted to her lover. But one thing is there, she is sympathetic, she is full of sympathy, sympathetic to her lover, and at last she transforms him into a grasshopper, Tidda, right? Grasshopper, Tidda. I wonder whether he's the same Tidda who comes to India every March and April and eating all the fruits and, sorry, all the corns and grains of our poor farmers. Anyway, so grasshopper. Anyway, the story is similar, and we can have the similar stories back in India as well. I know at least two of them. If you can let me know, maybe not today, maybe some other day, I shall be happy in that. Anyway, so the Sibyl, the woman of Sibyl at Cumae, Sibyl of Cumae, was asking for what? I want to die. She wants to die. And this becomes the fittest symbol for Eliot to describe the kind of life modern Westlanders, modern denizens of the cities are having. People want to have a big life. People want to have a longer life. They want to grow, I don't know to what extent. Simply concentrating on physical desires, the desires of the body, fulfilling the sense desires only, but simply ignoring the call of the soul, the call of the mind, the spirit, the call of the spirituality, the call of religious practices, the call of metaphysical essence. The modern Westlanders are, as I was talking, mechanical, they are robotic in nature, they are caught, as Yeats has written, in the sensual delight, and all neglect the monuments of unaging intellect. What could be better than this example for Eliot to think of as epigraph of the poem, The West Land. Petronius, Satyricon, 1st century AD, life in death, death in life. The West Land. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
So, thank you so much. And if you have something to ask, you may ask. These are the basic things in terms of the modern age, in terms of techniques and tools, in terms of T.S. Eliot, and in terms of the poem Wasteland itself, that you need to know, you need to remember. And I'm quite hopeful that this will enable you to understand not only the wasteland, but also the kind of writings which we shall be doing under the umbrella term of modernism and postmodernism in that way. Thank you so much. Any question, suggestion, query, whatever you have, if you want to say, you're most welcome. If not, enjoy the Sunday, have the lunch, and we shall meet tomorrow, 11 to 12, because this is going to be the timetable which you shall be given soon by Manjari. Okay then.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.